Welcome to MJ Hobby Corner, everyone. Today is Monday and it's the start of my work week here in the studio. And I just want to share a little thing with you guys. I'm working on this old board. I'm kind of restoring it. This was an old board that I found just recently. And I made this board, oh gosh, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. This board has been through a little bit of hell. It was done with a piece of foam board, and then all the sides were hot glued here. It is a double-sided board. So on this side there is a desert, and I'm going to be fixing that and restoring that a little bit. But there is a desert on this side and a sort of more forested region with a little river there, right? This was originally intended for War Machine a long time ago when I was playing War Machine. And so 28 millimeter can easily be played on this as well, you know, smaller war bands and such. So right now, to restore it a little bit, because it had some holes and some things, I mean, it's an older board. I just take my hot soldering iron and very carefully just do some detail on the felt that I put here to mimic vegetation. And this is a lot easier than using the flocking powder. I also save my flocking powder because I make my own flocking powder, but it just saves me having to make, you know, big batches of it. And so I'm perfectly okay with this technique, and I actually like it. And all I do is just make some details. These areas represent, areas of the vegetation that have been trampled by animals and things like that coming in and out of the watering area here, right? I've often seen this in vegetation clumps from higher elevation, and you get like these little furrows that form in the vegetation. It could also be moisture driven as well, as water kind of, you know, percolates through the vegetation. So I'm just doing that right now. And once I'm finished with that, I take a light green and dry brush all of my felt areas. So I have a little bit of felt here, okay, and some felt there. And then give the board a little bit more dry brush to accentuate all of this all these areas here. Now this is really cool because the foam board, when I put the hot glue here years ago, it really strengthened the edges of the board and protected them. If I hadn't done that, eventually all of this edge would chip because it's foam board. So I'm glad I did that. Now this is the paper or whatever that covers the board, and I actually hot glued some of the edges, like peeled it away a little bit when I was working with this and kind of hot glued the edges, and it formed these really, because of course this thing warps, it forms these awesome like furrows and things with age and everything else, right? Now this is coated in some of this is a little soft, okay, but for 15 millimeter it's great. Some of this all of this is coated with a texturing paint, and texture paint is pretty expensive. It's like $7 a can, or a little over $7 a can, but it sticks to everything, even tinfoil. And what I used to do was coat with that paint, you know, in bursts, and give it more texture. And then once it dried, go back with the dry brush or go back with another color of spray paint and kind of, you know, do these other areas. So once I'm done with this, I'm gonna give it a little dry brush, work on the river a little bit. Now the river was done with hot glue, just hot glue, and very cheap resin from Walmart. Is like a $3 Loctite resin. I don't have an example of it in the studio right now, but basically it was very cheap resin. I bought like 2 tubes, and once I had my hot glue down, I then started adding a little bit of that resin, make sure that it went seeped all the way down, and then made like a little rock work area here. I have to repaint that because the paint had worn out and everything. So repainted all that, and now I'm gonna do the water section once I'm finished with the vegetation, and then you'll see this in my games. All right, so I set up the table a little bit just to give me an idea of how my current terrain fits and what kinds of things I need to build and stuff. I have plenty of trees for this scale. The houses are not too bad. I don't have very many houses, so I'll have to build a few more. But here is the Ratman cavalry that I just finished in 15 millimeter. And so I'm going to have a little bit of a Ratman army. And these are archers, okay, from Battle Valor. And so I'm going to have Ratmen and maybe Gnolls. I'm going to finish a Gnoll infantry unit. Okay, so they're there. And then on this side, I just put some dwarf cavalry on bears. Yeah, those bears are going to eat up those rats. And then there's a necromancer here that I just finished for 15 millimeter. Okay, so it just gives me an idea of where I am with the terrain and with the board. So not a bad little restoration, and I could have trashed this, but then why? It's still a functional board. I'm going to do something here to eliminate some of this squareness. This used to come apart. So these boards used to come apart, but no longer. So this is what I'm doing now. So I got to just fix that a little bit so it's not so straight. And that's it. And then finish the river. I got to do some painting on the river. And then I will play a solo war game on this board. All right, so I just wanted to share that with you guys. That's it. By the way, these are walls that I made a while back. These are pretty cool. These are done with actual like sticks and stuff from the woods. I just collected some branches and made these walls. And these are too big for 15 millimeter. But I'm going to make more of these because they are pretty cool. These were more for 28 millimeter. And they're pretty big even for 28 millimeter, but still it looks good. And I usually surround my building with these, and yeah, so all right, so this is my desert portion, and I have these weird like formations coming out here, and I just textured them. Now I'm going to get a can of spray paint matching this paint and kind of blend them in a little bit more. But there is some kind of formation, something underneath with the sand accumulating, and it's forming these weird little island areas. Now, and then the rest is, of course, sea of sand. These are all dunes and stuff. So basically, once I just finished texturing, I did a little dry brushing. When I spray paint, I'm going to do a little more dry brushing to get the texture of that felt out. And then there's like a little rock formation coming out of the sand. I'm going to add a little bit of more sand there as well to kind of blend that little rock formation a little bit more. And then I use some of DM Scotty's method. I really love that method. And just used my hot glue and textured some of the edges around some of the felt. And I might do that to a lot of these, just again to represent like there's something underneath there, right? Where the sand is kind of disturbed. And there's all these little gullies through the sand, and that's done with my soldering iron. Word of caution when using a soldering tool to do any kind of heat related impressions, whether in felt or in foam, whatever, please wear masks. Please work in a ventilated area. You just never know what the hell you're inhaling. So make sure you keep all your safety procedures. But it is a very effective technique. All right, so let's put some terrain on this weird fantasy desert and see what's up. All right, so we put some terrain on the table. And some of this rock work that we're going to just see in a little bit, all of that stuff is part of the original terrain when I built this board that I made for it. So that rockwork has been with me for, well, quite some time, right? At the same time that I was making this board. So now that I'm restoring it, I add a few new pieces of like vegetation, and some of it is like bright red because it's magical. It uses magic instead of like actual sunlight. Maybe it absorbs some of the magic in the area. It becomes brilliant red for whatever reason. Whatever. I'm going to be writing a little article for my Patreon for the second tier, and I'll be talking about how I will be making my fantasy tables a little more alien. Okay, a little less like that parallel Earth that we always play in. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, like to change things up a little bit. So here are some little plastic Savila plants and Echinacea, I guess is what they call it in English. We call it Savila in Spanish. Um, but basically, all these little plants and things just added. They have to look scrubby. So just like this one here is one of my favorite. This one I made by casting a pine cone and then making a mold out of the pine cone, then casting it in resin. And then I added all this rope stuff on top, and you can add all kinds of canopy types to this, and it really does look like some kind of desert plant, right? So I want to make more of those. That's the only surviving one I have, but it'll look good in larger quantities. Okay, so this is some kind of scrubby desert area, good for things like Empire of the Dust, right? A game against Empire of the Dust, or any fantasy kind of scrubby desert habitat, will be represented by this board. Now, eventually, if I want to have more true desert, I eliminate the plants and just keep the rocks. And then I want to put bones. I want to make some skeletal creatures and scatter them around. Okay, that'll be cool in a desert setting as well. Also, if I want to have like a more Egyptian kind of thing going on, make some pyramid structures out of sand, whatever, and maybe more Egyptian style terrain, and then put it there and have it like some kind of, you know, tomb structure or something. And that would be very interesting against an army like Empire of the Dust, which they're already a little bit Egyptian anyway, their style, right? And here, this is one of my favorite rocks. So I'll be making more of that stuff. So again, I will have some how-tos here on the channel. On my Patreon, I'm going to be writing a couple of articles about this kind of stuff. So stay tuned. All right, now this is a very interesting board. Okay, I designed this board for playing Crix. My niece used to play Crix in War Machine. That was her true love, was Crix. And so I got her a few Crix models, and then we were going to play a series of games with the Crix theme, and it was going to be in a Crix swamp. So I designed this board with Crix in mind, and it was going to be like this magically altered swamp. And I just found these. Now, these are more damaged than the others. Again, when I made these, and I said 6 years earlier, but it's probably a lot. Now that I'm thinking, it's probably more than that. It's probably 8 or 9 years, because we've been on this property for close to 5 years, etc. So, yeah, it could be 8 or 9 years ago. So 8 or 9 years ago, and this board is still, alive, right? It's just damaged. It's warped now. And so I am going to restore this. And this is when the boards used to separate. So I have this cardboard lip there that back in the day when it was nice and firm, everything would connect. I'm going to probably join these because I don't need them to separate for the time being. What I really like is all this texture. Now, I did this in a special way, and I used toilet paper with water and glue, and that's how I made a coating. But before I used the toilet paper, water, and glue, I did a lot of hot gluing, and that's again inspired by good old DM Scotty. He's the man when it comes to hot glue gun. He's the man. So I did a lot of texturing with the hot glue, made all these little branches, all this crap, let it dry, and then put my toilet paper on top of that, my toilet paper and glue, right? With a little bit of paint, and it was a gray paint. I used a very like base coat type of paint, and I put it down. Let everything dry, and once everything dried, I came back and I spray painted everything and dry brushed and painted, and then I came up with this kind of texturing, which to me is very interesting. And then there's these areas of algae that I made as well, and it looks very scummy and very I don't know. I really like it. In my opinion, I like the way this thing came out. And I never did this again. You know, it's interesting because I kind of forgot about this method. So it's really cool. Now, I want to show you guys something, and because I don't want this video to be too long, I don't want to bore you guys. All right, I'm just looking at my terrain wall here, and we're going to put a couple of pieces of my cavern terrain. And this is an example of how this new terrain that I built new, how I can use a lot of my new stuff with my old stuff and really come up with some weird and cool new tables for our games. And this will change things for you guys so you guys are not always looking at the same old table. Here is the new cavern terrain that I built last year. Okay, and here's one of these smoky vents, right? And not bad. All right, represents some weird kind of rock work in this swamp. Add some swampy trees, some creepy trees, right? We could definitely add creepy trees there. And maybe a pool of water in the middle, real scummy. Add some skulls, maybe some weird faces coming out. And this is a good swamp terrain, right? So we're playing now in a fantasy swamp. So let me take this out and show you the last thing. And again, I hope I'm not boring you guys with this stuff. I'm hoping that this is of interest or use for you guys. I really don't want to like bore you with this stuff, but this is all, this is work that I've done in the past, and I just want to like share it with you guys. Well, this one is a deeper desert. This is another desert. Unlike the other one, this one's a darker kind of color. And I'm going to work on these a little bit to restore this a little bit. But this will be my sea of sand. This is the real, like, kind of, we'll make some dunes and things like that on the table. Now, it has to remain flat so that it's double-sided. But make some modular dunes of sand, add some pyramid structures, some Egyptian-like terrain, and we have a deeper desert. No vegetation like the other one. The other one is a scrubby desert. This is a true desert. So I'll be working on this. Not today. We're too busy today. And we have a game coming up, Grimdark. So this is going to be on hold. But I'm going to work on this and restore this board, because this board can give me some really cool playtime. All right? And we can have some really cool stuff going on here. And what I might do is make another one just like this, but small, for my 15 millimeter stuff. Okay, I could definitely play 15 millimeter on this, but it's going to be, I mean, I can play a huge army of 15 millimeter or 172 scale, whatever. But this was designed for 28 millimeter. Okay, so just wanted to show you guys that and give you an update. Now, remember, I'm going to be writing some articles and I'll put them on my Patreon. And this is some of the stuff that I'm going to discuss as well. All right, guys. Well, again, I don't want to bore you guys with too much with a long video. But in conclusion, these were some of the first boards that I made when I moved to PA. I had a long hiatus where I didn't play any war games. Everything was in boxes and crates and things like that. And I had a very small corner of a room where, where I did my painting and whatever. And these were the actual first boards that I started making when I moved here, because I got into games like Malifaux, and then after that was War Machine. I went crazy over War Machine and Hordes, and so I designed these boards. So my point is that it's great. It's a joy to be able to find this kind of stuff after years, right? This was in my brother's attic, and after a long time, and you think, oh, I lost that stuff, or that stuff's way too damaged, just trash it. But then I looked at it and I said, I can work with this. And now I have some extra boards, and they're double sided. And what I can do in a future video or a future project some point, make more of these and show exactly how I made them. Now, some of this material is going to be on our Patreon. It's going to be bonus material for patrons, and some of it will be here as well. Okay, so, but I'm excited about it because, again, it's a nice little project to restore these and then play some games on them. So hopefully this week, one of my solo war games, we're going to play with one of the restored boards. All right. So, yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you for our first patron on Patreon. Thank you for his support, and I'll talk to you guys very soon. I hope this was useful in some way, shape, or form. We'll talk very soon, and now let's get on to playing some Grim Dark. We have a game today.